On this episode of the Violent Professional Podcast, I sit down with a former Army Ranger and retired Little Bird pilot. We talk about his experience in Afghanistan right after 9/11, what it was like for him in flight school, and the culture shift from going from an Army Ranger into a career aviator. If you guys like this episode, please leave a comment below after the episode's over.
This is the Violent Professional Podcast brought to you by AriesClothing.com.
So how you been, dude?
I've been good.
Yeah. It's been a long time since I talked to you.
I miss those times where we would hold each other.
Yeah. Late at night. Fuck me.
Me and you and and and
That would be a fucking
We
nightmare if we were together.
oh my God. When I said that, my liver actually twitched inside my gut.
Yeah. Me too. So, Jim, I wanted to bring you on to the Violent Professional Podcast because I know you have a lot of stories. I've heard you tell some of them. They're always hilarious, and everybody's laughing their ass off when they hear them. So, if you could think back about your military career and being in the unit and whatnot, what would be your favorite memory from that time when you were in?
Well, you and I talked about this before we got on, and most of the stories that I can't tell, but this one story was actually published in a book. So I feel pretty good about telling this story. It's a pretty good story. It's the grenade story that you've probably heard me tell you a dozen times before. So.
Yeah, fuck it, let's do it live.
So we're in Afghanistan, and it was either the end of October or beginning of November 2001 before all the tourists got there. And Objective Rhino had just gone off, and everybody in the 160th got to play on that except the Little Birds. And we were walking around like, I hate to say it, but we were walking around like a bunch of bitches because we were really pissed off that we didn't get to play. I mean, we were really fucking pissed.
Damn.
So they came up with this deal where we were going to go up in Afghanistan, and basically we were going to shoot up anything of military value. And we were like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's go do that. So we got in there, and we went up. It was west of Kandahar, and there's a major road up there. And so we had two teams of two that launched out, and one team went to the east, one team went to the west. And we were the team that went to the east. I was dash 2, and there was another two guys up in front of me that were dash 1, and we start going down this road, and man, it was darker than 10 feet up a well digger's ass, man. It was the darkest place I'd ever been in my life. And we're flying down this road, and there's just nothing. Oh, wait a minute. Let me back up just a little bit.
All right.
We take off out of our assembly area, and because we were two teams of two, so the other team of two was first, and then my team was second, and I was the second guy in the second team. So I was the fourth dude to take off. And it was so incredibly dusty in the assembly area that we had to wait a really long time between aircraft taking off before the next aircraft could go. By the time I took off, those dudes were like, 3 or 4 miles ahead of me. Probably further than that. And a Little Bird, it's hard to make up that kind of distance when you're loaded. You're full gas and full bullets and full rockets. So I take off last, and I put the trail aircraft on the horizon in relation to what I could see, and I'm watching the radar altimeter, and I'm watching the numbers go up and down as we go over the sand dunes. And there was a digital readout, and there was also the dial, the little, arm that moved around based on what altitude you're at. And I just so happened to look in, and I see that dial spinning towards 0, and I just instinctively pulled back as hard as I could. And
Holy
we
shit.
fucking hit a sand dune. And the weird part was, even when we were on the top of this, like we smashed into this fucking sand dune and we're at the very tip of it. And even when we were on top of it, I looked down and I still couldn't see the fucking sand dune that I was on top of. Anyway, we kind of just clipped the top of it because we rolled off, we kind of skipped off the top of it and kept flying. And I was like, oh, holy shit, full of bullets, full of gas. That'd have been pretty spectacular. So I eventually caught the flight and got up to the guy that was in front of me, and I was like, hey, man, how's my landing? I came on the radar. I was like, hey, how's my landing gear look? And he's like, it looks fine. Why? I'm like, nothing, just wondering. But
Damn,
I'm not
dude.
kidding you. I fucking peed just a little bit when that happened. That was fucking...
Yeah,
was,
I think I would have done more than
weird.
that. Holy shit.
Yeah, that was.
I don't like that shit, man.
So,
that bothers me.
So that's how it started. That was the beginning of the day.
Oh, good start.
So we get up to the highway, and one team goes west, we go east, and we're flying along. And like I say, it's dark as hell. We don't see anything, and I'm like, wow, this is a waste of time. And we get down the road a ways, and finally we come across this little village where these, all the mud huts in there.
Yeah.
There's only like 10 or 12 of them, but they're stacked on top of each other
Yep.
for whatever reason. In the middle of 500 miles of desert, there's 10 houses stacked on top of each other. And we look on the east side of it, and there's T-55s and artillery pieces and tanker vehicles and just all this stuff. And we're like, woohoo! So we start shooting stuff up. And we're having a good time, man. Stuff's blowing up. We're shooting stuff. And see, what they would do is they would park their stuff, at least what we were told, is they would park their stuff up against towns and villages because they knew the Air Force wouldn't bomb them because of the risk of collateral damage.
Yeah.
But we didn't have that issue because, we were real close to it. So we were tearing shit up and stuff's blowing up and we're having a good time. High fives all around. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So after we do this for a while, the guy in the lead's like, hey, man, we're kind of, we still got 10 miles of road to cover. We got to head down the road. So you're like, Roger, we head out. And I start heading down this road, and we go to another 5 or 10 minutes down the road, and we see these two sets of headlights coming towards us. And as we get closer to the headlights, they turn their headlights off, and we're like, all right, let's go check this shit out. Yeah.
Damn.
So we get up there, and we fly right over the top of them, like 20 feet over the top of them. And I look down and I go to the guy in the lead and I'm like, dude, that's a 23-2 on, because what it was is it was a fucking, there was a fucking,
it's a fucking anti-aircraft gun.
Yeah. Well, there was a deuce and a half in the front and there was a fucking Land Rover behind it. Well, the deuce and a half had a 23-2, which for those of you who don't know, that's an anti-helicopter gun.
Yeah.
We fly over the top of it. They get on this fucking 23-2 and they're doing the wheelie thing, where they crank the arms and pedal their feet or whatever the fuck they do.
It'd be like Charlie Chaplin music in the background.
Yeah, the little Charlie Chaplin thing to try to get the gun around on us. And the dude in the lead, he fucking wheels around and now he's 10 feet above the ground, aimed right at this truck, probably... He was inside 100 feet away from this fucking thing. And he's 10 feet off the ground, and he opens up with a fucking Down 19 50 cal with armor-piercing incendiary rounds. And this fucking thing blows up. So I over the top of him, I'd come in, and I was like a 45 off of him, and I was maybe 100 feet in the air, and I was lined up on the fucking Land Rover. Well, he shoots this 23-2 and I guess he hit the magazine or whatever, but there were rounds cooking off and the thing was on fire and the two Gomers bail off the top of it. It was comical, man. We were rolling.
That's fucking
and
awesome.
I roll in on the Land Rover and I go to shoot and it's just nothing. The gun spins, but nothing comes out. I'm like, fucking. So I go to the guy I'm flying with. I'm like, hey, get your M4. And he's like, Roger. So breaks off and goes, hey, we're and I'm like, yeah, we are too. Let's go to fucking small arms and hand grenades. And these dudes in the Land Rover start bailing out. And there are, I don't know what the real number is, but the way I remember it, it seemed like there were 10 or 12 dudes that bailed on us. It was like a clown car, man. These dudes are rolling out of this fucking Land Rover. Half of them got AKs. They're shooting at us. We're shooting at them. So we fucking wheel around, and now we're diving over the top of them, shooting them with M4s. And then when our M4s started getting low, we had hand grenades, so we started slinging hand grenades out the windows at
Holy
these dudes.
shit.
We would like dive down and kind of line up, pull the pin, and then fucking sling the hand grenade at the dude and
That's
kind
so
of
awesome.
time it so it would bounce up to where they were. Oh yeah, it was fucking awesome, man. So all this stuff's going on. We're fucking giggling like schoolgirls and having a good time. And we get this call from this other asset that's overhead. And they're like, hey, man, we need a sit rep. And the guy I was flying with, he didn't think, and he just clicked the mic and goes, Roger, our asset, our call sign is we're down to small arm and hand grenades. And I look at him and I go, dude, you just said that on SATCOM.
Oh, the whole fucking country heard that.
Everybody
Holy
heard
shit.
that. And what's even funnier is General Daly is sitting at a talk with our battalion commander, and he turns to our battalion commander and just looks at him and goes, tell me those boys aren't throwing hand grenades out of my helicopters. But we were. So anyway, then we get this call from that same asset overhead, and he's like, it's like, hey, climb to 946 feet or some completely fucking random number. And we're like, God, whatever. So we totally ignore that, keep doing what we're doing. Jump ahead, we find out later that there was a dude on board that aircraft that had done the math and figured out that if we had climbed to whatever altitude he said and threw a hand grenade out, that it would airburst 10 feet above the ground to have maximum effect.
That's fucking awesome. They're watching that and calculating for you guys.
Dude, man, that's like somebody he's got way too much brain going on. That's
insane.
Anyway, so we're doing our thing and we're shooting these dudes and they're shooting at us. I mean, there's the whole time there's troops coming at us and we're slinging shit down at them. And so we got to the point there was maybe 2 or 3 dudes still moving, and Lead's like, hey man, we got to head back. We're about. So we decide we're gonna break off and head back, and so we're heading back, and I'm on the left side of him. I'm echelon left off the Lead, and Lead goes, hey man, you need to move over to the right side. I'm like, okay. So I fly over to the right side, and all of a sudden, boom, there's this big explosion on the ground. I'm like, oh, that was fucking weird. So we get back, and we're talking about it later, and he's like, yeah, man, the guy in the other seat is like, I still got a grenade. He's like, yeah, no problem. Just put it back in the fiber. He's like, yeah, I don't have the fiber. He goes, well, you got the pin in it, right? And he's like, no. He goes, you're sitting there with a live grenade in your hand? He goes, yeah, pretty much.
Holy shit.
So I move over and he throws the grenade. Then we head back to get more gas and bullets and go to some more. And the cool part of the story is that's the part we can tell because that's already been printed in a book with way more detail than what I just gave you.
Yeah.
But after we got gas and bullets, we went back out again. And the firefight we got in after that was way more crazy than that was. But that isn't really in the public domain, so I'm going to kind of just
keep your fucking mouth shut.
Keep my mouth shut because that's the way it should be. But
that's so fucking awesome. Like I've heard that story before, but every time it's fucking like new to me because it's so fucking hilarious.
It gets better every time I tell it, man.
Yeah. It's fucking amazing. But now, like, you've got a bunch of people listening that have never heard it, and they're going to be like, what the fuck? We don't know this shit happens. Like, I mean, they could read that book.
So this is a funny story that has to do with that. Is I went to the AGOS school for the Air Force, and I'm sitting there in the audience there, and the first day of class, they have a representative of every type of asset get up and talk about what they do. So fucking F-16 guy gets up there and he talks F-16 guy stuff, and an A-10 guy talks A-10 guy stuff, and bomber guy, a B-1 guy talks bomber guy stuff. So then this fucking actually, he was a CCT guy. He gets up and he talks all the special operations helicopter stuff, and he talks about 53s, and he talks about Pavehawks, and then that talks about 47s, and then he shows a picture of a Little Bird gun, and it's a picture of a fucking 86, and he just sits down on the edge of the stage and he goes, "Let me tell you about these fuckers," and then he tells the grenade story that I just told, and. And about 2 rows away from me, there was this dude that had a forehead that was about 18 inches tall. That was a B-52 guy. And he goes, "That's fucking bullshit." And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not bullshit. I was in that flight. And the cool part about that was I stayed very drunk for the rest of the time I was there and didn't have to buy a drink. So that was pretty cool.
That's fucking awesome. Fucking savage, dude. Like, you have like such an interesting background, like, because I know you were a ranger before, and then you became, a pilot. The fact that you can look from the ground and air perspective, I bet that was immensely helpful in your time as being a Little Bird pilot.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a fighter pilot. When I stayed home sick from school, I would draw pictures of P-51 Mustangs and F-104s and stuff like that. And wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. And then when I was about junior high, I started reading about what the modern fighter pilot was. And, the guys in Vietnam who shot missiles over the horizon, and the dude in the back seat was actually the guy who pressed the button. And sometimes they didn't even see who they were shooting. Just all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, dude, that's not what I want to do. I want to be like Gabreski and those guys in World War II that got within 200 meters of 200, sometimes 100 feet or 100 meters of their target, and had iron sights and fired their 650 cals and blew the dude up and had to fly through the shot. And I was like, that's what a fighter pilot is. But I found out that didn't exist anymore. So I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. So eventually I went in the Army as a Ranger, which was probably the smartest thing I ever did in my life. If I had not gone to a Ranger battalion, I would not be a pilot, and I sure as hell would not have made it to the 160th, because going to a Ranger battalion taught me what it meant to be a real soldier, a real warrior, somebody that, you learn that your mind is the weakest part of your body. And if you convince your mind of what you want to accomplish, you will accomplish it, whether your body thinks you can or not.
Yeah, it's got to transcend your whole life pretty much after that.
What's fucked up is you and I know what I'm talking about. There's probably a lot of people out that are listening to this that understand that, but there's a lot of people that think I'm talking bullshit. But that's the truth, man. You fucking learn that you can accomplish way more than you think you can.
Yeah, it's cool. On that, like we have so many different people that follow us and like listen to this podcast now, like that we started it. That's going to be interesting for them to hear that from your perspective as a pilot and a ground guy at one point.
Yeah, and realistically, like I said, I may have already said this, but I never would have been a pilot, and I sure as fuck never would have been a Little Bird dude if I hadn't been in a Ranger battalion first. Because guys like Baldridge, First Sergeant Baldridge, First Sergeant Flowers, First Sergeant Flower, Sergeant Flowers, dude. These are the kind of guys I fucking grew up with in a Ranger battalion. There was a guy named James Fowler. He was my first sergeant when I was in B Company, 375 in 1984. Damn. I had CQ one night, and and of course, when you're on CQ, what do? You go root through the first sergeant's office because there's no one else there. So on the wall is this framed write-up. It's a piece of paper that was typed on a manual typewriter, and you could tell it had been crunched up, like somebody had fucking balled it up and said, "Fuck this shit," and then smoothed it all out and put it in a frame. And it was his write-up for one of his Silver Stars. Oh. Then Sergeant Fowler was a squad leader and came in contact with the NVA. He was shot through the neck. So he chased the motherfucker down and stabbed him to death.
It said that in the write-up?
But it didn't say motherfucker, but it said all that other stuff. Yeah,
That would be awesome.
fucking chased him down and stabbed him. That's a bad motherfucker.
It's
So
like
here's
Samuel
the
L.
deal.
Jackson
I'm
wrote that
fucking
write-up.
Oh, wait, it gets better. So here's the deal. I'm 20 years old. I'm in the best shape of my motherfucking life. We just finished a 12-mile road march in Georgia with a fucking Ranger ruck on in however, 95-degree humid heat. And I'm pretty fucking smoked. And here's this dude that's, pushing 40 years old. And he's like, gather around, Rangers. We need to talk a little bit. And he's like, Rangers, I'm afraid the doc says I'm going to have to take a knee. I've been doing chemo for about 2 months now, and they're telling me that I've got to stop. What? Did you just say you're taking fucking chemo? You're almost 40 years old and you're taking chemo, and I'm almost dead from this fucking road march, and you let it, motherfucker.
Damn.
Yeah. So he actually had Graves' disease, which is a form of cancer. He was doing road marches while taking chemo.
Holy fuck. That's a bad man right there.
That's a bad motherfucker right there, yeah. So those are the kind of guys that I was around, and how can you not learn to be a better person being around people like that? I mean,
Yeah.
it's
almost a hard set of shoes to follow. That's
yeah.
So what made you like go from being what was your inspiration to go from being like a ranger? Because I know you love that, but what made you want to be a little bird? Like I know you guys are around that a lot, like seeing the little birds. But what was the moment?
We saw little birds a lot, and one time I was actually it was the first time we ever worked with the little birds, and I was I was sitting on one of the lift assets, and we were flying towards an objective, and I was watching the AHs, the attack assets, and they were escorting us. And as we got closer, they passed us, and they bumped up, and they nosed over, and they shot minigun and rockets. And I was like, that is the coolest fucking thing I have ever seen in my entire life. And we came back around, and we landed, and I went up and talked to the pilot, and I was like, hey, man, you know what? Oh, first of all, I looked in the cockpit. He had a grease pencil mark on the windscreen as his fire control computer.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I asked him about it. He said, yeah, costs 35 cents. Never breaks. So I was like, what do I need to do to be able to do this? And he goes, well, flight school would be a good start. And I was like, great. How do I do that? And he fucking told me how to put all my shit in. And I did, and that's all I ever wanted. I swear, all I ever wanted to be was a fucking little bird gun guy. After that, that was everything I wanted to do.
Yeah, you accomplished that goal. So, that's awesome.
Well, yeah, I mean, and there was a lot of luck and a lot of people that helped me out to get there. But
yeah, awesome. So after that, like you put in your package and then you went to flight school. What was that like? Because you never really hear about that kind of stuff. But it's all the stuff that I think is interesting is the in-between, like the stuff nobody really talks about.
Yeah, flight school was a bit of an experience for me. So for those of you that aren't in the military, there's a big difference between the infantry and aviation. To begin with, there's a huge difference between a Ranger battalion and aviation. And I went from a Ranger battalion to flight school just about the time all of this political correctness had hit the regular army. But it had not hit the Ranger battalion when I left. So when I showed up there, I had a completely different mindset than the people who were running the joint. And it led to some pretty interesting experiences for me.
This must have been a huge like culture shock coming from that kind of shit.
Yeah, fucking huge. So because I was a squad leader Ranger battalion, they made me the platoon sergeant of this fucking warrant officer class. And probably 65% of the class was guys that were straight from high school to flight school. So they'd gone to basic, and now they're in the warrant officer program. And then there was fucking Ranger Hosey, who just spent 3 years in a Ranger battalion and didn't know that the Army was different than what he had done for the last 3 years. So we go out on our very first fucking company run, and I'm out there calling cadence for the platoon, and I'm calling like Ranger cadence from back in the day, and it was like, you know, it was fucking awful. It was really obscene, and I thought that was normal. I thought it was totally cool, but apparently it was not. And
go ahead and do you remember what it was? Because I love these old like cadences.
One of them was a lady lieutenant said to me, "Where's that salute I expect to see?" So I jumped on the table to her surprise and shot my load right in her eyes. Now, keep in mind, that was the first 2 sentences, and it deteriorated rapidly from there. So,
damn.
I know it would. My mom would be upset with me. I said that, and they were upset, to say the least. And I was like, okay, cool. So we get a little further down the road, and this kind of overweight female falls out of the formation. Now, let's go back to my background. I came from a Ranger battalion. Back in the day, I had never seen anybody fall out of a battalion run. I had seen maybe in 3 years, 2 or 3 guys fall out of a company run. And we would spit on them and kick them as we went by. And when they fell out, they were like on the fucking ground puking. I mean, they fucking fell out. Now, squad run was a little different because, you know, you could get some dude that could run like a deer, and he would just, you know, he'd run your dicks in the dirt, and that was all cool. But there were certain standards for time that you had to meet for a battalion or company run, which were all way, way faster than what we had to do for this run. So we're running along, and this large female is kind of like, boom, and just steps out of the formation like, wow, that was tough. And I immediately snap into my Ranger squad leader mode, and I'm like, get your fat fucking ass back. What the fuck is wrong with you? And start explaining to her the error of her ways and how she should reconsider her life choices.
Damn.
Well, the black hats really didn't see things my way, and the next thing I know, I'm surrounded by 4 of these dudes, and one of them's got the brim of his cap right on my nose, and he's like, blah, 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 and I don't even remember the words coming out of his mouth, but I remember just kind of tilting my head like a dog and looking at him and go, what are you yelling at me for? She's the one that fucking fell out. And as soon as I said that, they all lost their fucking minds and started screaming at me.
Holy shit.
So fast forward about an hour, and I'm in the commander's office. Keep in mind, this is my first day of flight school. And he was like, sits me down, and he paces back and forth in front of me to come and say, and he goes, all right, Jim. And when he said Jim, that was the first time in 3 years that anyone in the military, especially someone who outranked me, had ever called me by my first name. And it really kind of like freaked me out a little bit. And he's like, Jim, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this is not a Ranger battalion. And I was like, okay, but it's still the Army, right? He goes, it's not the Army like you know it. He starts to go into this whole long thing about how we're kinder in general and everybody needs a hug and all that stuff. It basically says you need to fucking mellow out or you're not going to make it here.
Yeah.
So that was my first day of flight school.
Get your
it worked
fat
out.
fucking ass.
I relaxed a little bit. I did get put on super secret probation at one point for, I don't even want to talk about it. Anyway,
okay.
Yeah.
We'll do that
somebody
another time.
Pissed me off and I counseled him. Kind of took him to the OP. It wasn't approved. I was really lucky. I when I graduated flight school, I flew Apaches, and I was around to go to Desert Storm, flew Apaches there, and right after that, I assessed for the 160th. I had a battalion commander that was a former commander in the 160th who really fucking hooked me up with a good letter, got me to be able to assess, because that's the first step. I mean, if you can get in the door, you can show them what you got, and you either got it or you don't.
How long?
I have no fucking
How,
idea how I made it, but
how long were you a Apache pilot before you went to the 160th?
from the time I left the Ranger Battalion to the time I was in the 160th was about 2.5 years total.
Oh wow.
So it wasn't that long. Yeah. So back then, like when I assessed for the 160th, um, originally the minimum amount of hours you had to have were 1,000 hours of total flight time. When I showed up for my first day of Green Platoon, I had 368 total hours.
Oh wow.
And I think a lot of that was a function of they're having trouble getting guys or whatever. But the bottom line was I showed up, and when I left my unit, in my unit, I was really fucking squared away. Within my company, I was really good at what I did, and had won Top Gun and was like third Top Gun in Europe or some crazy shit like that, and everything was cool. So I thought I was going to show up to the 160th, and this was going to be like a fucking breeze. I was going to walk in there, and I was going to be the man. And I got there, and my very first day, I flew with a guy named Ron Howard, who is an amazing pilot. And we were doing maneuvers that were, we were doing maneuvers that were illegal in the regular fucking Army. And so we get through the whole day of doing this stuff, and he's demonstrating this stuff for me. Oh, this is the funny part. We do this one maneuver. So back then, if you had over however many years of flight school, you got $650 a month for flight pay. Right? So I think it was maybe if you had 4 years of flight experience, you got $650 a month. Well, at the time, I was only getting $158 because I only had like 2.5 years of flight experience. So we do this one maneuver. We do a 180 auto to the sod, which means a 180 auto to the grass in an aircraft that it was my first day in. and I do it for the second time, and I fuck it up. And he goes, for $650 a month, you ought to be able to do this. And I go, well, I'm only making $158 a month. And he goes, oh, in that case, it's not bad. But dude, I went back to my hotel room that night, and I sat on the end of the bed, and I put my head in my hands, and I was like, holy fuck, I am in way over my head. Because these guys, I mean, dude, I don't know how it is now, but I can tell you this. Back then, the fucking 160th was the varsity team.
Yeah.
And I don't care how good you thought you were in your unit or all that other stuff. You may have been the best high school football player ever, but the first day you step on a field of Division I, you're like, whoa, I've got a lot to learn.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it felt like.
I bet.
everyone that was there were fucking rock stars. And the whole time I was there, I felt like the C student that somehow got put into the AP history class. You know what I mean? It's like these are all like really smart dudes and I'm like, well, why am I here? But I'm still here. So I don't know. It goes back to that Ranger thing. Just stick it out and work hard and strong like bull, smart like tractor, that kind of thing.
So what's interesting about you is you have the ground perspective as well as the perspective from the air. So I think it's probably what makes you an effective pilot more so than somebody that hasn't been in that particular
And
situation.
that's something that's helped me through my whole career as an aviator, because aviators as a rule, if they don't have the prior ground experience, they have absolutely no clue how the guy on the ground thinks.
Yeah.
I mean, even guys that do casts for a living, I mean, they communicate with the ground guys all the time, and they think they kind of understand how those guys are wired, but unless you've done that for a while, you just can't kind of grasp that mindset.
Yeah.
It's completely different.
Yeah, I saw it on the Air Force side with the some of the ALOs that would come out of the cockpit for a little bit. They get a better understanding of the ground scheme maneuver and all that good shit, and then go back to the cockpit.
Yeah,
And I think it
and
makes
it's
them
not a
effective.
slam of the air guys. It's just, if you've never seen it before and you've never lived in that environment, you don't really understand how completely different it is from the air environment.
Yeah, exactly.
They kind of feel like they know what that mindset is because they work with them all the time. And as air guys go, they do know quite a bit, but they're still,
Yeah.
there's still a big gap there.
Yeah. Shit, man. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I love all the stories. We got to get you on again sometime and talk some more. We'll get maybe when we're in town together, we'll down some booze and be face to face and tell some stories.
Sounds like a plan, man.
Fuck yeah. All right, brother. I'll see you next time.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye.